Hello, everyone. I'm Lance King, and I am with Jeromy Dixson of Smile Services and Smile Dental Group, who is on sabbatical, technically. And we are just so grateful that you've made time for us. And kind of at the outset of this interview, I think it'd be important for our listeners to know where you're at, and if you could kind of give us a glimpse into your personal life.
Sure. Thanks for having me, first of all, Lance. Appreciate the opportunity to come here and be on the show with you. It's so a little bit about my personal life. I have a wife that I've been married to for 18 years, happily married, 3 boys, ages 14, 11, and almost 7 in a couple weeks.
Oh, okay.
So we are an active family. We love to travel. We love to be active. We hike. We live in the Pacific Northwest, so we enjoy all of the outdoor activities that are inherently there in the Northwest. And I love to have new experiences. I read a ton. Just curious about everything, about life, and just love to learn. So I'm actually on sabbatical right now, as you mentioned, and we left July 6th, so we're just about exactly 10 months away from the last time I stepped foot on U.S. soil. And
really,
we've traveled all around the world. We've spent 3 months in Europe, a couple months in Africa, a month in India, 3 months in Southeast Asia, and New Zealand. And then I'm coming to you right now from Lima, Peru. So
you're living the dream.
It's fantastic.
I mean, seriously, I know there are doctors listening in right now that are just so envious of where you're at.
Well, hopefully I can, we in this interview, I can share some things that helped me, some things I learned along the way, and maybe help some others achieve what I'm doing right now. It is amazing. If anybody has a chance, definitely take the opportunity to travel. It broadens your perspective and your mind, and just the experiences and bonding that happens is incredible.
Fantastic. Well, and a question that I have for you is, what is one thing about your profession that most people don't typically know?
Okay, that's a good question. I think one thing that a lot of people know, if they know a dentist, a lot of them know that maybe they work Monday through Thursday, 4 days a week, the 3-day weekends, and while some do, some do work 5 days, some work less. Just like any profession, there's a variety of kind of ways of going about your profession, and I think the one thing that I didn't know before I became a dentist, and after over a decade of practicing and managing dozens of dentists, is that dentists they go into it generally because they care, and they work really, really hard. It is a difficult profession mentally and physically, and for that reason, I think that's why a lot of dentists do tend to work less than 5 days in the clinic. A lot of times that extra day is doing business administration, continuing education, sometimes relaxing as well. But when you're, at least in the practices that I've been involved with, and in my dental practice, it was a full tilt from the time I stepped foot until the time I left, often without a lunch, often staying late, getting home late to my family for dinner. And, I did it because I loved it. You try to help people. They come in with an emergency, and you just want to do anything you can to get them out of pain and get them doing well. So I think that's something that a lot of people don't know, is how hard dentists do work when they're in their clinics.
Well, I just want to acknowledge you for all the work that you've done, and for all dentists and doctors and healthcare providers. Really, you do so much, and the trend that I hear on these interviews is that the motivation initially really is just that care, that care for other people and improving the quality of their lives. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, well, talk to us about, when you look back on your timeline of things that you've done in your career, take us back to a time when you failed and unpack that experience for us, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, as most people who have kind of had big goals and big dreams, often failure does occur. And you hear, and especially in entrepreneurship, you hear about how every super successful entrepreneur has had, catastrophic failures.
Yes.
And so, I've certainly had my share. I think sometimes I tell people that I can help them because I have made all the mistakes, and, and so because of that, I can maybe help them avoid some of those mistakes. So I think, the thing when you ask that question that comes to mind most readily is a couple of the practice acquisitions that I transacted. So a part of my business, I'm not sure how much people know about Smiles Dental Group and Smile Services, but I was the CEO founder of those organizations. We primarily were in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, Washington, Alaska. We had several dozen dental practices by the time I stepped down as CEO, and a dental service organization is essentially a management organization that takes care of all of the non-clinical aspects of a dental office. So
like a DSO.
Sure. Yeah. And it's a similar model in medicine as well. So in a lot of larger groups, it's similar to that. So our primary strategy was to find the top 5 or 10% of dental practices in the areas we were, and purchase them and bring them into our group so that we could manage the business functions of all the doctors to really focus on patient care. Because there's not a business class. I never had a business class until I was out of school. I started reading business books and eventually went back to school for a master's in business administration. But before that, I never had. I was a straight science major and then dental school. And so, I think they have. I shouldn't say that. They do have 1 or 2. They call them business courses in dental school, but it's practice management. It's nothing that's very applicable. So
right.
So essentially, I would identify really high-end practices and work with the doctors to bring them into our group. And so we would purchase the practice, sometimes all at once. Sometimes it would be over a period of time, and we would then manage the practices for them. And some were retiring, and a variety of models that worked with us. But the biggest failures, I think, when I think back, are a couple of the practices that after they joined our group, there was animosity towards either myself or just the situation, and it was very difficult for a couple of the doctors to I guess assimilate into coming in and working on the clinic, but not having to deal with all of the different aspects of the business. And I understand that, and it's a difficult thing. And some of them were maybe several years from retiring, and they'd done it for 30 years.
Sure.
So it was difficult, but I think what over time I understood better. I think where they were coming from in terms of what was difficult about them, about that situation emotionally, and just from a professional standpoint. And I think we got a lot better at it. But the one thing, and this is probably a nice little pearl for anybody in healthcare, whether it's dental, medical, optometry, chiropractic, whatever. If you are working with doctors and bringing them into a group, I think if doctors have a large ego, and I guess larger than normal, and the practice is their identity, I would suggest you steer clear, because that combination is really tough to deal with when you're trying to kind of build common ground, work together for a future. If now I can deal with one or the other. I can deal with someone with a larger ego, or someone with where the practice is their identity. But if their practice is their identity and they're humble enough to kind of come together and work for a common good, then it's great. And on the ego side, if the practice isn't their identity, but they really like that recognition, and then that's something that model can also give them what they need. But when you have the combination, it's very difficult. And so, I just got to a point where if I met with the doctor, assess the situation, and if there were those two characteristics, I just walked away, and came out a lot better, I think, in the long run.
Okay.
That's just kind of a pearl that I think people would help. And one other thing I would add to that is, if you're negotiating a contract with somebody, no matter whatever it's for, employment contract or buying a practice or healthcare facility, and it's contentious or it drags on a long time, after that's signed, it's going to be the same way. So again, I sometimes it gets to a point and I just kind of decided over time, and I think I got a lot better at it, just walking away and saying, this just isn't going to work. And so anyway, a couple of my big failures.
Those are great pearls. And certainly that there's whenever there's tension, that really makes for a rough go. And when egos get involved, that can be really tough to smooth things out. So,
Sure.
So start at the beginning and make sure you've really done your homework and your due diligence on who you're bringing in, because it sounds like you did a lot to support these dentists. What were some of the services that you'd provide as a service and a group?
Yeah, sure. So, we would, any business functions we brought into Smiles Dental Group, and Smile Services. So that includes any insurance billing, all of the marketing functions, human resources, physical facilities care, and maintenance. We would provide continuing education for the doctors. Just any and all functions non-clinical related, we would provide. So so and it's a model that, it's like I said, it's called a DSO, Dental Service Organization. It's becoming more and more prominent in the industry, and there are alternative models that are similar in other healthcare realms, in medical and optometry and chiropractic and others.
And are dentists moving more toward being a part of these groups and being a part of these dental support organizations because they want to focus more on just serving the patient, and they don't want to have to deal with the administrative reasons? Is that the number one reason?
Yeah, I think it's certainly multifactorial, and that is one of the primary factors is that doctors, it used to be, I'll give you just it's a very subjective example, but I, a couple of years ago, spoke at the University of Washington Dental School, and talked about Smile Services and talked to the students about it. And I had all of the students at the beginning of the talk raise their hand if they were interested in coming out of school and purchasing a practice. And I can't remember if it was 0 or 1 of the students, and there were probably 40 or 50 there that were planning on coming out and purchasing a practice. Now, when I graduated
that's surprising.
when I graduated from dental school, now almost 15 years ago, it was probably it would probably turn that around. I mean, it was almost probably over 90% of people were planning on doing something like that, or going into a short-term associateship and then owning.
Yeah, and scaling. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, a lot. So one of the factors is that certainly with the millennial generation and more women in dentistry who are becoming a higher percentage of the dental students. Many women choose part-time work as well, or aren't as interested in owning. Those are just the facts on the gender split. So I think that's part of it, as well as it's becoming more expensive to run a dental practice with the technology that's coming out, and to make some of those large capital purchases is difficult when you are a single practitioner. Insurance is becoming less private pay, more PPO. So there are so many factors that are going into it that definitely the trend is, I would say 12 to 15 years ago, over 90% of dentists were in a solo practice or maybe a partnership. And now I believe it's in the 60s. And so the bulk of that 20 to 30% difference is dentists who have moved from private practice or a solo partnership practice to a group practice or a DSO.
Wow. And you say a big part of that is just this evolution of technology and how it's being used. What are some of the technological upgrades and evolutions that have taken place throughout the years?
Well, sure. I mean, there are still a few practices out there that don't have digital x-rays, that do traditional film x-ray. So that's one. That's not very super expensive. You can retrofit it to systems, but I think the big drivers are probably the kind of the CEREC, the CAD CAM crown, where you can make a crown in an hour or 2 hours. And that you come in, you get your crown the same day, and it's milled in the office with a CAD CAM machine and computer aided design. And those systems can run several $100,000 all in, or between 100 and 200,000, as well as some of the CT scanning technology. As dentists get more into implants, and standard of care for implants evolves, that's going to become more of a necessity to have some of those expensive imaging machines to get three-dimensional imaging. So I think, there are many, but those are probably two of the largest technological drivers.
Do you hear about virtual reality being used at all, or is that still in something that's being forecasted in dentistry?
I haven't. Dentistry, I love dentistry, but I think one of the things about dentistry is it does tend to be a little bit slow to adopt new technology. And I think healthcare is changing that way, but I do think dentistry does tend to be a little bit slower. Now, I do think it's changing. I think younger dentists and mid-career dentists are adopting technology at a far greater rate than the generation prior. But I think that it will, that will continue to evolve, and dentists will adopt the technology much faster as things move ahead.
Right. So it sounds like what I'm gathering too is a lot of dentists perhaps wait for the early adopters of technology to determine whether or not it makes sense and it's actually something that's going to make a difference with their patient care.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's in many ways a wise move.
I agree.
But I think technology is moving faster, and so I think that the industry needs to move faster. And in terms of virtual reality, going back to your earlier question, um, honestly, I think that virtual reality is, I'm not sure, maybe not virtual reality, but certainly if you think about applying AI to dentistry and some of the interesting applications, I think that there's certainly a huge future there that I'm very interested in as I'm moving ahead more pointing and pivoting toward technology, actually, and that's one of the areas I'm eyeing.
So I'm interested to know a little bit of background on how you determined that Smile Services and Smile Dental Group was the way you wanted to transition your career, and then I have some questions about how you think you're going to scale. So do you mind unpacking a little bit of the background, starting back when you were 7 or 8? What did you think you were going to be when you grew up?
Okay, well, I'm actually one of the odd ones that knew what I wanted to do very early. It did change a little bit, but I'll try to be very brief with this. But I had two very formative experiences when I was a child with medical care. The first was when I was in 2nd grade, and my appendix ruptured. So that can actually be a life-threatening situation. And yeah, it ruptured, and I was in the hospital, the Children's Hospital in Portland, Oregon, for several weeks, and it was a really rough. I can't remember the number of ribbons I had, but they gave me a ribbon for every time I had a needle stick of any type, and I think by the end of it I was in the 60s. So I remembered it, and
how could you not?
You do remember those things, and I have a scar to show for that, but the doctors and the nurses and the medical teams there at Dornbecker Children's Hospital in Portland, they saved my life. And so I remembered that. And then, so that was in 2nd grade. And then in 7th grade, there was a fluke accident that I won't get into details, but I ruptured my bladder. And
oh my goodness.
Which is, again, I'm usually only seen in very traumatic automobile crashes and things like that. And so I was in the hospital. It was a very traumatic experience. I was a little bit older at that point. I was 12 or 13. And again, great, amazing, empathetic, caring doctors, nurses, and teams saved my life. And so, I mean, I had these two formative experiences, and it changed me. And after that, from the time I left the hospital around 12 or 13 years old, I wanted to go into medicine. And so I went through high school and went into college and was pre-medical and worked through all the tough science classes and all the things associated with that. And I got to my junior year, and at that point I was getting really serious about applying to medical school. And I decided to go talk to some doctors that I knew, and went to a few lectures from doctors that were visiting the university. And I would go up to them and ask them afterwards, what part of medicine do you think is the future? What would you recommend someone like me going into if I want to be like you? And I think I talked to 4 or 5 doctors, and I can't remember if it was all of them or all but one said, this was in the mid 90s, so mid to late 90s. So HMOs were emerging, different forms of care. And it was a time of great change. And they all said, medicine's changing, and I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but dentistry, that's what you should look into. I didn't ask them about dentistry. They just brought it up. And so I said, I got to listen. I want to be like these guys and women, and this is what they're telling me, so I better listen. And so then I went to my dentist and shadowed him and started looking into dentistry, and I fell in love with the mix of the physical work and really the thing that appealed to me most was a general practice where you get to know families and generations and have those personal relationships. Because the doctors that I talked to said that that was waning. That was kind of going by the wayside, and I really wanted to have those personal relationships, and so I switched to dentistry, essentially, and switched course from taking the MCAT to the DAT, and
wow.
switched to dentistry. So I ended up going to Southern Illinois University in outside of St. Louis, Missouri. Graduated in 2004, and right about that time, Heartland Dental Care, led by Rick Workman and Pat Bauer. Dr. Workman also went to my dental school, and it was just a couple hours up the road. And they were the largest dental group. I don't think DSO was invented at the time. The largest dental group in the country.
Okay.
And I'm not sure exactly what the number was, but it was between a third and half of my class, something like that, went to work for them in 2000.
Really? Wow.
And yeah, so I mean, they were right in the backyard, and so 50% might be high, but it was and I came back to home, which was the Pacific Northwest, Portland, Oregon area, and noticed that there wasn't a premier dental group in the area. There were a few dental groups that were around, but they were what I would consider not your higher end family dental care with a very high level of service and very high quality of dentistry. And so I just I got out and I started working for what I was an employee for Smiles before I owned it. So I worked as an associate dentist there, and had some really great partners that were thinking about groups at the time. And then I kind of took my experiences in the Midwest and saw what was happening there, and really started looking at, okay, what's dentistry going to look like in 10 years or 15 years? And I pretty early on came to the conclusion that it was going to consolidate, because all industries, if you look at bookstores or tire stores or any kind of store, they start with a mom and pop shop, and then as the industry evolves, they do consolidate and they become groups. And that is just how business works. It's going from a cottage industry to a mature industry. And so I knew that would happen in dentistry. I kind of recognized that really early. And I went all in on it. I just started reading business books and management books, and got excited with my partners about building a group, even though we probably weren't qualified to really, we didn't have a lot of business experience other than just day to day. But I really had a vision for what it was going to look like, and so I started putting in the work. And I bet between 2004 when I got out of school and 2009 when I started my MBA, I probably read over 200 books on business management and leadership, and articles and Harvard Business Review, and it was my passion. It became my passion, and I wanted to do it right. And so that's the route I went, and eventually enrolled for my MBA in healthcare management at Oregon Health and Science University in Portland. Finished that, and unfortunately, my partners at the time, they're really great men, and I was proud of that they were my partners. But at the time, they're about 10 years older than I was, and a different stage of life, and really just wanted to focus on having one dental practice and not managing a group. And so I ended up in 2010 kind of buying them out, and they took their practice, and that's when I really started building Smiles over that next 3 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So how did you recruit help, and I mean, how do you scale a group? You just
Well, when you ask me that question, Lance, it reminds me of have you seen the poster where there's an iceberg, and then there's like the water, and then below the water is like 90%
huge
iceberg, right? And so above the water, you see the success, and you see the you know, I'm traveling across the world and taking a year off and doing all these things. But what you don't see is that 95% of the work that was below that, and a lot of it was tough, you know, tough stuff and energy draining. And but you know, I think if you're an entrepreneur, you're always going to have things thrown at you that will make you want to quit. Yeah. And I think if you believe in it enough, you just keep going. I mean, you have to be smart about what you're doing and make good decisions and take calculated risks. But I think the ones that succeed are the ones that don't quit and they know what they're doing, right? I mean, there's a combination. You have to have a little bit, and certainly you have to have luck. And for me, I believe some of the best dental professionals in the country that worked on my team and worked directly with me. And so it wasn't just me. I don't want it to come across that way at all. It was, I was a part of it. I had a vision, but at the end of the day, it was my team and the doctors and the whole organization that made it great and made it work. And so I definitely want to make sure that that's clear as I'm talking about this.
Well, and it sounds like you had a lot of mentorship, not just in the literature that you wrote or that you read, but you surrounded yourself with a lot of good mentors.
Yeah, I did. I tried. You know, I think actually that's one of the things now as I've been on my sabbatical and thinking about, you know, okay, now I've done this, I've accomplished this, I've taken this time off to rejuvenate and kind of redirect and make a pivot to whatever's next in my career. And as I've thought about that, that's something that I want to be able to do for other people, because I did have several really amazing mentors. Some were closer than others, but some were. I mean, in 2008, I was able to have the opportunity to go to Dr. Workman of Heartland Dental's home, meet his family, and talk with him for 3 hours about this stuff. And it was one of the highlights of my career. And just, you know, to be able to have the access, and I'm just some dentist from Washington State that shows up and wants to meet with him, and for him to spend the time with me, it really meant a lot. And I still really respect him. I respect his organization and what he's doing, and Pat Bauer and some of the other folks there that are doing great work. So, you know, he was one. Now, I didn't talk with him all the time, but it was very formative. And for me, it was a great illustration and great example of how I want to be to help other doctors, dentists that are interested in doing this. That's kind of where I'm pivoting toward, as well as on the technology side. There's a couple projects I'm working on, but one of them, probably my main project, is called the DSO project, and it's basically I'm going to handpick a maximum of 5 dentists each year to dig in with them and build a DSO. And so that's kind of the driver behind it, is that kind of paying it forward, giving back, and mentoring. Because while I did have great mentors, I didn't have anything like that, and it would have been nice sometimes. So,
well, that's incredible that you have that drive. And I've heard, I don't know if you read any books by John C. Maxwell.
Absolutely, I have. Yeah.
Okay,
so on Twitter too.
Yeah, he's somebody that's been impactful to me. I've gone through so many of his books, and one thing I loved is when he talks about the different seasons of life, where there's a season to learn, a season to earn, and then a season to return. Right. And it sounds like you're starting to transition into that return.
That's a great encapsulation of what I'm talking about. I don't know if I've thought of it quite in those terms, but that's exactly right. I mean, whatever I do, I want to be among the best at what I'm doing. It's just my father is a very driven individual. He works harder than anyone I know. And I work pretty hard, but compared to him, I'm, he is just, he's very driven. And he instilled in me that value of, you know, if you're going to do something, if you're going to spend your time doing something, be the best and be the best. And maybe you can't be the best in the world, but you can be the best you can be. And so that's how I've always kind of measured myself as, I don't really, I mean, I try to see what other people are doing to know my, I guess, to know the train, so to speak, if I'm getting into business, but in something, yeah. But I think I'm not necessarily competitive with people, because I feel like that's a little bit of a fruitless endeavor. I feel like the only thing that I can do is be the best I can be. And, you know, the only thing Lance can do is be the best Lance can be. If you compare yourself to other people too much, I think being disappointed, because no matter what, there's always somebody that's more talented or whatever. So
that's instructive for people that are obsessed with getting on social media and getting into other people's lives and trying to, you know, it's one thing to want to become better, want to become like somebody, but I do think a lot of people, they use social media in their lives, yeah. and that really ends up being draining instead of something that's a stimulus.
Sure. And you're seeing, right. I mean, I think we've all seen some of the studies that have come out on that lately. And I am not a big, heavy social media user. I actually lately just joined Facebook, and part of it was trying to become more networked with kind of my new endeavors and mentoring. But I think so. I'm new to it. I'm trying to figure it out. I do a little LinkedIn and other things. I use Twitter for news. I don't really connect too much on there. But yeah, I think I unfortunately it's a really fine line, because I've always had people that I've held up and really tried to emulate in some ways, but not in a competitive way. More like, I really admire that man's character or that woman's friendliness or whatever the quality is, and to try to learn from that, and maybe try to bring it more into your normal, you know, my normal life. But not necessarily try to compete. Do you see the difference? What I'm trying to get at there?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the key. Is I think if we try to compete too much, you're setting yourself up for failure. And in life, I like to set myself up for success, not failure.
Fantastic. And I think with everybody, there are things good and bad that we can observe and then learn to adopt and adapt into our lives to make us better people. And actually that brings up a question. It's,
sure.
I was thinking about, Tony Robbins once said that success leaves clues, and
right.
you've had many successes, which certainly has brought you onto the show today. I'm just wondering if you'd mind sharing one personal habit that has helped to contribute to the hard work and to the success that you've accomplished.
Yeah, that's another good, Lance, you're full of good questions here. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Oh, I think anybody I've known that's been successful, extremely successful, and been a great leader, has always had a curious mind. So often that means you're reading, you're learning, you're growing, you're networking, all of those things that help provide you with a new perspective and a larger perspective than you had. And in many ways, I think as we grow and evolve personally and in our careers and spiritually, any way you look at it, it's very much a situation where we become comfortable, and it's our nature to stay comfortable. And so I've always, for some reason, whether it's innate or learned, I don't know, but I've always got to that stage where I was comfortable and then became uncomfortable with being comfortable, and said,
right.
I can't stay here. I can't stay in this place. I need to move, and I need to grow, and I need to become something greater. And so that's what pushed me. I mean, I had a great job when I came out. I could have just been an employee dentist and been fine, but I just had this vision, and I felt like it was something I should do and achieve it. So I started reading, and then I, proceeded through that, and then I enrolled in the MBA, and then, I just kept going and going. So I think for me, it's every day spending. It's the Stephen Covey sharpen the saw.
Yeah.
Just spend that time each week, each day, have a plan, and have a routine, especially in the morning, where you're doing some reading, meditation, spirituality, whatever. And then there's been a lot of talk lately of the, I think it's called the 5-hour rule or something like that, where Bill Gates is doing it. This is something I've done for a long time, where you spend a little time each day and you do something just to learn, not a task, but you just spend time learning something you're interested in. And so I think there's a couple things, and I think overall, beginning with the end in mind, again, a Covey 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of the principles there is beginning with the end in mind, and other people have used that, and you hear that it's ubiquitous in the business world. But I think I see a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of people over the years say, I want to start a dental group, and they just start frantically, I'm going to buy a practice, I'm going to do this, and they just start, and they don't have a plan that is completely
scalable,
right? And then you end up, what happens is you end up with chaos instead of, and there's chaos anyway when you're growing and you're scaling, and so if you can minimize the chaos, better off and the more successful you'll be.
Fantastic. One thing I heard once, I don't know if you've heard of an author, Rory Vaden. He has a book called Take the Stairs and Procrastinate on Purpose. And one of his books, he said that success is never owned, it's rented, and the rent is due every day.
Every day. I haven't read the book, but I've heard that quote. And
I love that. And it sounds like that's something that you'd say is applicable.
Sure. I mean, it just takes a lot of grit to build something great. I think and that's why you hear of these great, and I'm not in this class at all, but these great entrepreneurs, you look at Richard Branson at Virgin, and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and all the people you hear about, it's grit. I mean, they all had major crises and failures, and but they believed in what they were doing, and they had a drive that was uncommon, and that pushed them through those obstacles. Because the world's going to throw obstacles at you every day, and you just have to keep pushing through if you want to achieve your goals. So,
a couple more questions for you, Jeromy.
Sure.
I'm wondering if you mind sharing 3 things that have become absolute truths for you, and let's say that your sons, that at the end of your life, they were to say, "Hey, Dad, what are 3 things that have become absolute truths for you?" What would you share with us today?
Wow, you're getting deep on me, Lance. Good question again. Okay, so these are evolving for me, some of them. One of them's crystallizing just recently, but my wife shared a quote with me in the last couple of weeks, and she said she read it somewhere and she shared it with me, and I think it would qualify as one of these truths I've been thinking about a lot, but hadn't quite encapsulated into the quote, like she mentioned to me. And she said, "In a world where you can be anything, be kind." And I especially with we've been traveling, but we see the news and things that are happening politically in the United States. I don't want to really get into that, but there's a lot of division. There are a lot of different competing theories and sides and principles and beliefs. And at the end of the day, if everybody can just be kind and listen, I think most of the things we can work out. And that's something that I've learned traveling the world this year is, we've politics and religion and life with people from all over the world. And there are so many more things that unite us than divide us globally, let alone in the United States. And so I think if there's a little more kindness, a little more understanding, a little more system 2 thinking, so system 1, if you're familiar with Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman, it's, kind of that reactive emotional thinking, system 1, versus deliberative thought, system 2. I think the whole world could probably take a deep breath and do a little bit more deliberation and and be more kind. So that's one.
Okay.
Another one, if I'm talking to my boys and trying to give them advice, I think that I would tell them that the things that matter most in life are your relationships with the people you love, and the experiences you have together. I think in our society, in our culture, there's a lot of self-promotion and selfishness, I think, and kind of sometimes we forget. Even I've been there. I had to work a lot of hours and missed part of childhoods for my children while I was doing this work. And as I've had time to reflect, I'm really grateful for the time that I've had with them this year. But I want to be very intentional with my time and with the projects I take on, with the people I work with, because at the end of the day, I think those are the things that are most important, are those relationships that you make and the experiences you have. And so
completely agree.
I think that's a huge one. So that's 2. I've got 2 of them checked off.
Okay.
The third one, I would say, this is kind of a cliche, and I don't know. I could probably think of a better one if I thought a little longer about the question. But I think there's no such thing as a free lunch. A lot of people, again, with the iceberg poster, and I think that some people believe that they're entitled to a certain lifestyle or certain things. And I think in life, it's the people that have the grit and the persistence and the vision and the discipline to make their dreams reality that have the most rich life. And I don't look at success just monetarily. In fact, I don't even think it's very high, the monetary success. I think there's very successful people, much more successful people that have little money but have rich relationships, have amazing families.
Yeah.
And that is so much more important. But it took work for them to develop those things. It takes work to have a family life that is harmonious and that is beautiful. And it takes work to have relationships with friends. And it takes work to grow a business. And it takes work to have a great network. And so I think the importance of work, as long as it's in the right context, I think it's key. Because if you don't have that, and if you're entitled or you're a victim, then you're never going to achieve your goals, because it's always going to be someone else's fault that you don't have the great family or the great job or the great company.
Yep. It's funny that you should talk about that principle, because I was talking about that with my family last night. And specifically, I really was. And specifically, I was sharing with my daughters that when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to a line of other things. And so to consider your opportunity costs and at any rate, like you say, I think we're on the same page with that. Well, two more things, and we'll wrap up the interview today, Jeromy. First, just wanting to know how your definition of entrepreneurship has changed, and then if you wouldn't mind giving some parting advice, and then we'll close up the interview.
Okay, sure. How my definition of entrepreneurship has changed. I guess, it's changed and evolved over this last 13 years, I guess, since I graduated from dental school, tremendously. And I think that when I first set out on the entrepreneurial journey, I was very naive. So naive about how much work it would be, what it would take, the sacrifices that were entailed in doing what I wanted to do. And so I think I didn't have a lot of business education. I didn't have a lot of experience. And so I was certainly somewhat naive. But I think that in some ways it's good to be a little bit naive as an entrepreneur. I think if you knew all the work and all the issues and all the things you'd have to deal with and the sacrifices you would make, you probably wouldn't do it. But for me, as I look back, it was an amazing journey. Even though it was a lot of work, I made some great friends, had a great relationship with so many of the doctors and coworkers. And I built something I was really proud of. And so I'm glad that I did it. So I think in terms of now I look at entrepreneurship probably 50% at least from a kind of business business science standpoint.
Okay.
And with a little bit more of a wealth of experience, having some education in business and having experiences as an entrepreneur and making mistakes and having some successes. I think that I look at it more of as a framework rather than this big.
Oh, I like that.
This big goal. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now I have, so for instance, now I'm working on the DSO project. And I'm working on, I think probably next year, I'm looking at potentially another DSO. And I have these projects. And now I actually have the ability to create a framework that's based on goals and dreams and visions and missions, but also being able to put some good business strategy behind it, where 10 years ago, I didn't have that capability. I had to kind of learn from the school of hard knocks.
Yeah. You can now apply that framework into your next pursuit.
Right.
And have that confidence.
Exactly. So I think that's probably how I look at it differently. And I think there are great opportunities. Are you familiar with blue ocean theory or blue ocean strategy, Lance? Is that you heard of that?
I'm not.
Before?
Okay,
so I'll be really brief. I know we're toward the end here, but blue ocean strategy is essentially creating your own market. So you create a company that doesn't have any competition versus a red ocean. Think of a red ocean with all the sharks and the fish and the blood and everybody's eating each other.
Okay.
Literally in the red ocean. So like dentistry, I look at dentistry, like dentistry itself in general is a red ocean. You've got each community has, or any town, any size, has hundreds of thousands of dentists, and they're all essentially advertising the same things, and there's no differentiation, right? It's like, if you know, there is, but you don't know it from the market. Well, I'm a big believer in blue ocean strategy, which is like creating uncontested market space and creating a company or a niche that nobody else occupies, so you can essentially run undeterred to wherever you're heading. And so that's one of the reasons why I got into the DSO world, in 2004, was at the time, it was a blue ocean, I felt, especially in the region I was. But now with there's a lot more consolidation that's happened, a lot more private equity money coming in. The larger groups are growing quicker. So I think it's becoming, it's not a red ocean yet, but it's certainly like trending away from blue ocean to red ocean. And so I'm looking now at, as I look at entrepreneurship through that lens of saying what in 10 years, what's next? Where's the blue ocean? And to me, it's in technology applied to dentistry and applying technology to disrupt dentistry. And not just dentistry, but markets adjacent to dentistry as well. So that's kind of like really what I'm focusing my energy in right now, as well as the mentoring and as well as potentially if I did work with another DSO, I would definitely want to have some differentiation from others to have some uncontested market space. So that's kind of a strategy that in terms of entrepreneurship, that's the lens I see it through. And I think it's got it if you're a company. So
great.
What was the last question? I know there was one last question.
Just some parting advice, and then we will close our interview.
Sure. So my parting advice, I'll try to keep it short and sweet. I think in general, there's 3 things that make a business. It's people, products or services, and profits. You have to have those 3, right? In any business. Am I right or am I wrong, Lance?
Absolutely. Yep. Completely agree.
So I think that especially in healthcare, because of the nature of the services you're providing, the products you're providing, but really in any business, the order has to be right or you're going to fail every time. So for instance, if you put finances as the primary goal of your business, you'll fail every time because you won't take care of the people and the product and service won't be what it needs to be.
Good point. And
that's been a philosophy that I've always held, and it's always held true. And I've seen it, and I think in healthcare it's amplified. I think in healthcare you have to be even less focused on the financial part. Certainly it's a key part of running a business, but I think to me, if the focus is on the people, and you take care of the people and you have the relationships and you're engaging doctors and your teams in a mission, a vision, a value, and values that are compelling and that get people motivated and that are changing healthcare, then you've got a recipe for success. But you have to take care of the people because the people make the business. And when if you lose good people, guess what happens to the business? You don't have one anymore. It goes away. And I've seen that happen. I've seen it from afar. I've seen it from close. And that's a principle that I think is so key in business. So and you have to get your product and service right. If you don't have, for instance, great clinical quality, you can have great people, but your business is going to perform the way that it should because it's going to get around. People are going to know that the quality at your dental office isn't what it ought to be. And so I think people, product or service, finances last. And if you do those first 2, the financial part will take care of itself. And for me, as I ran Smiles, I had to look at financials every month, but at the end of the day, it was never about that. And it was the right way to do it. So that's
fantastic.
My advice.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing that parting advice. And Jeromy, thank you so much for joining us today. I know we worked to get you on the show for a couple of weeks. I'm so glad that this fit with everything that you've got going on in your life. And so thank you so much for joining us. And if you'd stay on the air with me for just a minute after. And for our listeners, this has been an interview with Jeromy Dixson of Smile Services and Smile Dental Group. Thank you so much for joining us today.